Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. KYLEE Abbott's world doesn't shatter all at once. It fractures quietly, almost politely, the way Genoa City's secrets always do, beginning with a hesitation in Audra Charles's voice that KYLEE initially mistakes for nerves but soon recognizes as something far heavier, something rehearsed, something that has been waiting for the right moment to detonate. And when Audra finally speaks, standing in the muted glow of the Abbott living room with Jack's portrait watching from the wall like a silent judge, the words don't come out dramatic or explosive but measured, restrained, almost clinical, which somehow makes them more devastating, because Audra doesn't confess out of guilt or fear but out of inevitability, admitting that the version of herself KYLEE fell in love with was never the full truth and that the reason she always kept one foot out the door, the reason she flinched whenever KYLEE talked about long-term plans, marriage, children, or even permanence, was because Audra has been carrying a secret tied not only to her past but to the very foundation of Genoa City's power structure. A secret that, once spoken, cannot be unheard, and as KYLEE listens, her confusion turns to disbelief and then to a slow, creeping horror when Audra reveals that years ago, long before Genoa City ever knew her name, she was entangled in a covert corporate scheme involving Newman Enterprises and a shell company designed to siphon money during a hostile acquisition. A scheme masterminded not by Victor Newman himself but by someone operating with his quiet blessing, someone whose identity Audra has protected because exposing it would bring down far more than just a business empire. And when KYLEE presses her, desperate now, voice cracking as she demands to know why this matters to them, Audra finally delivers the blow that leaves the room spinning. The illegal maneuvering she participated in directly funded the development of the tech platform KYLEE later helped refine at Genoa, meaning KYLEE's own success, her reputation, and her financial stability are unknowingly built on fraud, laundering, and stolen capital. And the realization hits KYLEE like physical pain because everything she has fought for, every late night, every sacrifice, every moral line she believed she never crossed, has been contaminated without her consent, without her knowledge. And Audra's voice trembles for the first time as she admits that Victor knows Audra was involved, that he has the evidence, and that he has been waiting, watching, using Audra as a pressure point, a sleeper agent in Genoa City's elite circles. And KYLEE finally understands why Victor has alternated between protecting and threatening Audra, why Nikki has looked at her with thinly veiled suspicion, why Victoria has never trusted her instincts where Audra is concerned, and the weight of it all collapses inward, leaving KYLEE breathless, furious, betrayed not only by Audra but by a city that seems built on invisible deals and unspoken debts. And when KYLEE storms out, her heels striking the pavement with purpose and pain, Genoa City begins to ripple as the truth spreads not through gossip but through silence. Jack notices KYLEE withdrawing from meetings, Billy senses something is wrong but can't penetrate her defenses, and Summer, ever perceptive, catches Audra leaving the athletic club with red-rimmed eyes and a posture that screams fallout, while Victor, watching from the shadows, allows himself a rare, satisfied smile because control, not chaos, has always been his true objective. And when KYLEE finally confronts him at the Newman Ranch, demanding to know how long he's known and how far he plans to push this leverage, Victor doesn't deny anything, instead calmly explaining that power is not about who pulls the trigger but who loads the gun, and that KYLEE, whether she likes it or not, is now holding a weapon that could destroy her career, Audra's freedom, and multiple corporate dynasties. And the choice he offers her is cruel in its elegance. Stay silent and accept a quiet partnership under Newman influence, or expose everything and watch Genoa City burn, including herself. And KYLEE leaves that conversation shaken but resolute, refusing to be another pawn in Victor Newman's endless chess game, even as fear gnaws at her because she knows going public could mean prison for Audra, financial ruin for Genoa, and social exile for herself. And the fallout intensifies when whispers reach the Abbotts, when Jack confronts KYLEE about potential regulatory exposure, when board members begin subtly distancing themselves, and when Audra, finally stripped of her armor, admits to Sally that she's tired of surviving and terrified of being honest. And Genoa City, sensing blood in the water, reacts exactly as it always does. Alliances shift, old enemies circle back, and moral lines blur as everyone calculates how much truth they can afford. And in a final, devastating turn, KYLEE calls a press conference not to confess but to reclaim her narrative, exposing just enough of the corruption to protect herself while leaving Victor dangerously exposed. triggering investigations that threaten Newman Enterprises, igniting fury from Victoria, quiet panic from Nick, and icy restraint from Victor, who recognizes in KYLEE something he rarely encounters, a moral adversary who understands the cost of power and chooses defiance anyway. And as the episode closes, Audra watches KYLEE from across the room at Crimson Lights, knowing their relationship may never recover, but also knowing that for the first time, the truth, however incomplete, has been spoken, leaving Genoa City stunned, divided, and on the brink of a reckoning that promises consequences no one can fully control. Because in Genoa City, secrets don't just destroy lives, they reshape them forever. The aftermath of KYLEE's calculated press conference doesn't explode immediately, but instead seeps through Genoa City like poison through groundwater, slow and invisible yet impossible to contain. As regulatory agencies begin quietly requesting documents, board members start canceling lunches, and longtime power players suddenly discover urgent reasons to be elsewhere whenever the word Audra is mentioned, and KYLEE, though outwardly composed, feels the crushing weight of every choice she's made pressing down on her chest, because while she protected herself from immediate ruin, she knows she has ignited something far larger than she can control, something Victor Newman has survived for decades by bending instead of breaking. And true to form, Victor doesn't lash out publicly but retreats into silence, the most dangerous posture he can assume, prompting Nikki to confront him late one night at the ranch, her voice sharp with concern as she demands to know whether KYLEE Abbott has finally crossed a line even Victor can't erase, and Victor, pouring a drink he doesn't intend to finish, admits that KYLEE underestimated the cost of defiance in a town built on leverage. Yet there is something in his eyes, respect perhaps, that unsettles Nikki more than anger ever could, while across town Audra Charles becomes the epicenter of whispered speculation, her past dissected and rewritten by people who once toasted her ambition, and she moves through Genoa City like a ghost, attending meetings she knows may be her last, answering questions from lawyers with careful precision, and replaying every choice she ever made that led her here, haunted not by the crime itself but by the realization that she let someone else, KYLEE, pay the emotional price for it. And when Audra finally breaks down in private with Nate, admitting that she never intended for KYLEE to be collateral damage, Nate reminds her that intentions don't absolve consequences, a truth that hits Audra harder than any legal threat. And meanwhile Jack Abbott finds himself caught between loyalty and responsibility, defending KYLEE publicly while privately scrambling to shield Jabot from regulatory implosion. His conversations with Ashley growing more tense as she warns him that protecting KYLEE too fiercely could cost the company everything they've rebuilt, and Jack, torn between fatherly instinct and corporate duty, begins to question whether Genoa City has finally demanded a sacrifice even he can't negotiate away, while Billy, sensing cracks in the family foundation, oscillates between reckless anger and rare clarity, accusing Victor of orchestrating yet another generational war and urging KYLEE to walk away before the city devours her whole. But KYLEE refuses, believing that retreat would validate every corrupt system she's fighting against. Even as the isolation begins to set in, friendships cooling, invitations disappearing, and whispers following her into every room, and the personal cost becomes undeniable when KYLEE and Audra finally confront each other without lawyers, without strategy, just raw emotion spilling into the space between them. Audra confessing that she fell in love with KYLEE not despite the secret but because KYLEE represented the person Audra wished she could be. Uncompromised, principled, fearless, and KYLEE, through tears she refuses to let fall, admits that betrayal hurts less than being used as an unwitting shield. And the conversation ends not with forgiveness but with acceptance that some fractures never fully heal. And as Genoa City adjusts to its new fault lines, Victoria Newman steps forward as Victor's public defender, aggressively framing the investigation as politically motivated, her tone sharp and unwavering, while Nick quietly explores contingency plans, sensing that his father's empire may finally be vulnerable. And in the shadows, lesser players begin making moves. Phyllis feeding selective information to the press, Tucker circling Jabot like a shark sensing blood, and Adam watching everything with calculated patience, recognizing opportunity where others see chaos. And KYLEE, exhausted yet resolute, realizes that the battle is no longer about Audra's secret but about who Genoa City chooses to believe deserves power without accountability. And when subpoenas finally arrive and a formal investigation is announced, the city holds its breath, not because it expects justice but because it knows exposure always demands a price. And as the chapter closes, KYLEE stands alone in her office late at night, lights of the city flickering beyond the glass, fully aware that whatever happens next, vindication, downfall, or something far messier, she has crossed a threshold that cannot be undone, proving once again that in Genoa City, truth is never free, love is never clean, and survival belongs not to the strongest, but to those willing to live with the consequences of their choices. As the investigation inches forward with agonizing slowness, Genoa City settles into a tense holding pattern where every smile feels rehearsed and every conversation sounds like it might be recorded, and KYLEE Abbott becomes acutely aware that survival now requires a different kind of strength, not bold confrontation but disciplined restraint, because the more she speaks, the more her words can be twisted, and so she retreats into observation, watching how people who once praised her integrity now measure every interaction for risk, and it is in this silence that KYLEE begins to understand the true architecture of Genoa City power, realizing that corruption doesn't always announce itself with crime but hides in loyalty tests, selective memory, and the quiet willingness to look away, while Audra Charles, trapped in legal limbo, faces a different reckoning altogether as prosecutors signal interest in offering her immunity in exchange for full cooperation, an option that terrifies her. Not because of what she might reveal but because of who would be destroyed by it, including people she once believed were untouchable, and when Audra confides this possibility to KYLEE in a rare, carefully arranged meeting, the emotional distance between them is palpable, yet beneath it lingers an undeniable connection forged through shared fallout, and KYLEE surprises herself by telling Audra that whatever choice she makes must be hers alone, not driven by guilt or fear, a moment of grace that Audra doesn't deserve but desperately needs, and elsewhere Victor Newman continues to play the long game, publicly projecting calm confidence while privately dismantling internal threats, quietly removing executives who might cooperate with investigators, securing offshore protections, and reminding his family that survival has always required sacrifice, a stance that fractures the Newman household as Victoria doubles down on loyalty. Nick grows increasingly conflicted, and Adam, sensing vulnerability, begins positioning himself as the only Newman willing to evolve rather than dominate, and Nikki, caught between love and conscience, begins asking questions she avoided for years, wondering whether the empire she helped build is worth the collateral damage it continues to demand, while Jack Abbott faces mounting pressure from the board to distance Jabot from KYLEE entirely, a suggestion he initially rejects until legal counsel warns that sentimentality could cost thousands of jobs, forcing Jack into sleepless nights where fatherhood and leadership collide. And when he finally sits KYLEE down to discuss contingency plans, the conversation is raw and devastating, not because of anger but because both understand that no matter how this ends, something precious between them has already been altered by the weight of responsibility, and as Genoa City's social fabric strains, old rivalries reignite with renewed purpose. Phyllis feeds anonymous tips to bloggers framing herself as a truth warrior while settling personal scores. Tucker exploits instability to negotiate leverage, and lesser players scramble to align with whichever dynasty appears least likely to fall, and in the midst of this chaos, KYLEE experiences a quiet but profound transformation, shedding the illusion that integrity alone can shield her from harm and instead embracing a more complex truth, that morality in Genoa City is not about purity but about choosing which battles are worth the cost. And when Audra ultimately decides to cooperate with investigators, the city braces for impact as sealed indictments loom and confidential testimonies threaten to expose decades of backroom deals, prompting Victor to confront Audra one final time, not with rage but with cold acknowledgement, recognizing in her the same survival instinct that built his empire, and warning her that truth has a way of isolating those who speak it, and Audra, trembling but resolute, responds that isolation is preferable to living as someone else's contingency plan, a declaration that echoes through Genoa City as subpoenas multiply, alliances fracture, and the illusion of permanence crumbles, and as this chapter closes, KYLEE stands at the edge of everything she once believed defined success, career, love, approval, fully aware that she may lose it all, yet strangely at peace knowing that for the first time, her choices are truly her own, leaving Genoa City poised on the brink of irreversible change, where power will not disappear but be reshaped, and where the consequences of Audra's secret will reverberate long after the headlines fade. Because in this city, the truth never ends a story. It only begins the next war. The city itself seems to respond to the tension as if aware that something monumental has shifted, Every intersection, boardroom and cafe becomes a theater for unspoken anxieties, and KYLEE Abbott, despite her outward composure, feels the pressure of invisible eyes tracking her every move, noting what she says, what she doesn't, and the way she reacts when a name is dropped or a topic veers too close to the scandal that has consumed Genoa City. Even casual encounters carry weight. Sally Spectra pauses too long over a coffee order as if measuring loyalty. Summer Newman's sharp gaze seems to follow KYLEE across hallways with barely concealed suspicion, and Jack Abbott, who once believed that strategy could outweigh emotion, finds himself hesitating in meetings, wondering whether the personal stakes are now too entwined with the professional to act decisively. Audra Charles, meanwhile, has become almost ethereal in the eyes of the public, visible but untouchable, her presence carrying the dual burden of guilt and survival, walking into offices, courtrooms, and social gatherings with a posture that mixes defiance and exhaustion, knowing that every word she utters is catalogued, analyzed, and could be used against her or anyone she cares about. And when she confides in KYLEE about the loneliness that comes from living as a secret, KYLEE realizes that the betrayal she initially felt has evolved into something more nuanced, an empathetic understanding of the impossible tightrope Audra has walked for years, and in that moment, the two women share a fragile truce, recognizing that their personal connection exists in spite of chaos, not because of it. Yet outside their bubble, Genoa City continues to fracture under the strain. Board meetings at Jabot become exercises in tension, with Ashley Abbott carefully weighing which side of the unfolding scandal to support while subtly signaling to Jack that he cannot protect KYLEE forever. And every glance exchanged with executives feels like a coded warning that allegiances can shift as easily as fortunes, while Victor Newman, in his customary calculated silence, orchestrates behind the scenes, quietly consolidating his influence, instructing legal counsel to map vulnerabilities, and ensuring that every potential leak is intercepted before it reaches a public forum, a cold demonstration of the way power in Genoa City is wielded not through brute force but through patient anticipation. And as Victor moves, so too does everyone else. Phyllis Summers leverages minor gossip into strategic advantage, knowing that perception is almost as valuable as proof. Tucker McCall edges closer to the Newman-Abbott orbit, ready to pounce if instability creates a window for influence, and Adam Newman, calculating with his usual precision, identifies who might bend, who will break, and who can be manipulated into creating cracks wide enough for him to exploit. All while Nick Newman attempts to balance loyalty to his family with a genuine desire for justice, a moral line that is thinner than ever and threatens to snap under pressure. Within this maelstrom, KYLEE realizes that she must evolve beyond the reactive person she once was. Every decision now carries not just personal consequences but corporate, familial, and social repercussions, forcing her to consider long-term strategies, anticipate betrayal, and leverage information without compromising her principles entirely. And as she begins documenting the events surrounding Audra's secret, she discovers that the scale of deception extends far beyond what she initially understood, implicating old alliances, financial irregularities, and legal loopholes that have been exploited for decades, which simultaneously terrifies and motivates her because knowledge is now power in the truest sense, yet wielding it comes with enormous risk. The tension reaches a personal apex when Audra faces prosecutors in a preliminary hearing, the courtroom quiet save for the scratching of pens and the shuffle of papers, and as she delivers careful testimony, revealing selective truths while protecting herself and KYLEE, the weight of her presence, simultaneously vulnerable and resilient, shifts the room's energy, causing seasoned lawyers, reporters, and observers to recalibrate expectations, while KYLEE waits outside the courtroom, heart pounding, struggling to maintain composure as she contemplates the ripple effects of every admission. And when the hearing adjourns, Audra steps into KYLEE's arms, their shared gaze acknowledging pain, survival, and an unspoken bond forged in crisis, a bond that feels impossibly fragile yet essential. And while they have each other, the world beyond their connection is increasingly treacherous. Social alliances fray as power players reassess loyalty. Victoria Newman doubles down on protecting her father while privately maneuvering to contain the fallout. Nick attempts discreet interventions to prevent family members from self-destruction, and Jack and Ashley continue navigating corporate politics that have suddenly become morally ambiguous, every decision requiring careful calculation of both optics and legality. And in the midst of it all, KYLEE learns that her personal relationships are no longer immune to scandal. As old friends hesitate to meet, romantic interests falter under scrutiny, and every conversation feels potentially weaponizable. Meanwhile, Victor's presence looms over every interaction, his influence, like gravity pulling the city's players into orbit around him, ensuring that even actions meant to resist his control are subtly guided by his understanding of fear, desire, and leverage. And yet, despite the danger, KYLEE discovers an inner resilience, a capacity to anticipate, adapt, and manipulate truth for protection without losing sight of her integrity, a skill that slowly begins to redefine her reputation in Genoa City from naive idealist to formidable strategist, a change observed by both allies and adversaries, and this transformation sets the stage for a delicate balancing act, to expose enough truth to survive, to protect those she loves, and to ensure that when the inevitable reckoning comes, KYLEE is not only prepared but empowered, ready to navigate the perilous intersections of family loyalty, corporate intrigue, and personal morality, all while Genoa City watches, breath held, as if anticipating the next move in a game where every revelation, every misstep, and every act of courage or deceit could shift power permanently. And as night falls over the city, KYLEE stands alone in her office, lights of the skyline glittering like fragments of possibility, knowing that survival in Genoa City is neither guaranteed nor simple, but determined by a combination of courage, cunning, and the ability to endure consequences far larger than any one individual. And in this crucible of secrets, power, and shifting alliances, she finally accepts that she will be defined not by the scandal that engulfed her but by the choices she makes in response, and that true strength may not lie in avoiding betrayal or scandal, but in surviving it while retaining enough integrity to shape the next chapter of her life, whatever Genoa City may throw her way. Despite the relative calm that comes with nightfall, KYLEE Abbott feels the city's tension pressing against her from every window, every darkened street, and every familiar face that now carries a subtle, scrutinizing weight, and as she reflects on the past weeks, she realizes that nothing in her life or in Genoa City will ever feel safe or predictable again, because Audra's secret has not merely exposed wrongdoing, it has unmasked the fragile scaffolding upon which reputations, relationships, and fortunes were built, and even those who once seemed loyal are now tentative, carefully measuring their words and actions as though one misstep could ignite disaster. Jack Abbott, in particular, has grown increasingly restless, pacing his office late into the night, rehearsing conversations he has yet to have with board members, legal counsel, and even KYLEE herself, torn between paternal instinct and corporate obligation, aware that protecting her may cost him credibility, influence, and peace of mind, while simultaneously understanding that abandoning her could irreparably fracture the family he has spent decades trying to hold together. And as he contemplates these impossible choices, he notices the subtle shift in Ashley's demeanor, the quiet vigilance in her eyes, and the way she carefully phrases every remark about corporate exposure, a reminder that even allies can become adversaries when stakes are high enough. Across town, Audra Charles sits in the dim light of her apartment, reviewing every legal document, every transcript, every whispered accusation, and she finally allows herself to admit to the raw fear she has carried for months, not of prison, not of ruin, but of the knowledge that KYLEE has been drawn into a world she never asked for, a world where survival requires moral compromise, strategic cunning, and the willingness to endure betrayal from those she once trusted. And as she contemplates the consequences of her cooperation with authorities, she realizes that the decision she makes now will not only determine her own future but also define the life, reputation, and happiness of the person she cares for most, and the weight of this responsibility nearly crushes her, leaving her trembling with exhaustion, gratitude, and dread simultaneously. Meanwhile, Victor Newman, ever patient and calculating, watches the city from the solitude of his office, acknowledging silently that while KYLEE has shown courage, resilience, and intelligence, her defiance cannot go untested, and so he begins a subtle campaign to assess loyalty, probe weaknesses, and ensure that every move she makes is accounted for, not through overt confrontation but through quiet pressure, financial leverage, and social maneuvering, a reminder that in Genoa City, power is never absent but merely redistributed with careful precision, and even allies can be instruments of influence in the wrong hands. And in the midst of this intricate web, KYLEE begins to recognize the depth of her own transformation, understanding that surviving the fallout of Audra's secret requires not just moral clarity but strategic foresight, emotional control, and the ability to anticipate betrayal before it materializes. And as she begins to plan her next steps, carefully, methodically, and without haste, She feels a strange mixture of fear and empowerment, aware that each choice could protect or destroy her, that each word she speaks could clarify truth or invite disaster, and that her relationships, career, and sense of self will never again be insulated from the consequences of Genoa City's relentless scrutiny. Yet within this realization, KYLEE also senses a quiet, unshakable determination, that no matter how many forces converge against her, no matter how deeply the city's corruption has penetrated her life, she will not simply survive. She will navigate, endure, and ultimately shape the story on her own terms, proving to herself, and perhaps to the entire city, that strength is not measured by the absence of scandal, but by the courage to face it head-on, to act with intelligence and integrity, and to retain one's sense of self amid the chaos that defines life in Genoa City, where secrets, lies, power, and love are always intertwined, and the next chapter waits for no one.